Direction for Our Times features the Interior Life podcast, which is a bagpipe production sponsored by Aging with Dignity.
Hello, my name is Kathryn Clark. We're here to talk about spirituality. Now, today we're going to talk about how to choose the right person for marriage. Say you're a single person and you're thinking, I wouldn't mind being married. I like that. I have a desire to be married. And so that's great. And a lot of people before they're married say, "Oh, there's no nice guys out there." And the guys say, "Oh, there's no nice girls out there." That's generally the experience until you find the person. Um, and all you can say is that you continue to look. Many people are meeting their spouses online these days. So that's a reality we have to look at. And it's not that it's you you get to know the person, but it does seem to connect people. And so it shouldn't be discounted as a way to meet people. And we all know so many people who have met their spouses online now. There you go, that bites off. Okay, so now you've met someone, you're dating, you're thinking about getting married, and you're wondering if it's the right decision. And it is a big one. And nobody is going into a marriage with absolute certainty. So there's going to be some doubt there. You're going to be unsure. You're going to hope that it will work out. But I don't think if we're being honest, anyone can be absolutely certain that it's going to be wonderful on every day. As a matter of fact, we can be certain that it's not. But so what we're doing actually is before we make that commitment, we're discerning. We're making a decision over time with prayer. We don't decide about it, we discern it. So what should be involved in this discernment? Okay, it's basic, but deserves to be stated. Pay attention to what the person does, at least as much or more so than what they say. Because again, if you have that, you're always looking out for manipulation, aren't you? And how something's landing with you. And if you're generally feeling pretty confident that the person says certain things and then they act that same way in their life, that's a good thing. But when you have a situation where the person says that they follow all these values, but then their actions don't match up, you've got a warning sign right there. That's not a good thing. And these are not, now I'm talking about how do you discern a relationship with someone who's generally healthy. This is not ruling out intimate partner violence or domestic violence. That's a different podcast, and we'll do that separately. So you're dating this person, it's going well enough, and there are the questions that have to be asked. So does this person want children? Do they have an idea of having children that matches yours? That's the only way to do that is to talk about it and to ask about it, because it's kind of not something that you automatically are going to land on the same page. Some people actually have a different view of life. It's very important to talk about your ideal life. What's your ideal life? Does it include children? How many children? Or is that something anyone should decide before they get married? Maybe they should have an idea, but if they're open to life, that idea could change. Is there flexibility in this person that you're thinking of being married to? You know, the other thing is, the person suitable for marriage. Are you suitable for marriage? Marriage is a considerable ask. And I've so often heard people talk about getting married, and they're talking about the externals. Again, the objectification. Well, so it's important to say, what does the idea of marriage bring to me? What might it bring me that I like? People will say, oh, a house, someone to do stuff with, someone to talk to, a companion, etc. This is the better question for you and your intended. What is marriage going to ask of me? What is marriage going to require of me? How will marriage change things that I like about life that I'll have to surrender? I mean, if you're a lone wolf and you like to be mostly alone, that has to be admitted to. You got to acknowledge that. And then, you don't like loneliness. Nobody does. But one of the things that has to be negotiated very imperfectly after a marriage is how much alone time do we each need, and um, and how does your need for alone time impact your spouse? For example, um, does your need for 3 hours of alone time after work make your spouse feel unloved or insecure? And how will that be negotiated? It's not that the things are deal breakers, unless they are. It's just that how are we going to handle that? And in a lot of things, when you get married, you're going to bump into, like, boom, this just happens. And you're like, oh, wow, this is a rather tough moment because you think one thing and I think another thing. And here we are, we're married. And everyone's going to have those moments. And then you're going to have those moments where you say, oh my gosh, did we make the most horrible mistake ever by getting married? Yeah, I mean, that's a moment. It's just a moment. It just shouldn't panic you. That happens. And then you, together, you find a way to drive around that moment into a space of shared understanding, and adjustments will need to be made. Point is, the time to look at some of this is before you're married. So you want to know that you're suitable for marriage and that your partner is suitable for marriage. So it's a deeply personal decision, but the following considerations are helpful. Okay, so let's talk about attraction. There has to be some chemistry of some description. I mean, it doesn't have to be. This is the problem with the media. People in the most non-sexual television programs are having wild sex all over the place. And you're kind of like, wow, okay, I didn't see that coming. It seems like everything on Netflix, most of the shows have to include some of these. And they're not, I don't know, they're pretty intense scenes. Maybe it's me, but there has to be chemistry for sure. But it doesn't, I don't think it should or has to look like what you see on television programs or Netflix, because while chemistry is important, it's uniquely, deeply, exquisitely personal and private. And two people sharing that is not going to look like everyone else's. And yet, if it's healthy, it's going to look like most other people as well. The choreographed scenes, the manufactured explosive sexuality, I just don't know. I really can't, I probably just don't know enough about it to say it just isn't that way for most people, I would think. But we have some real jokes about this because a lot of people I've spoken to agree with it. And now we have the porn culture. So there we have it, which to me is like acid thrown on something beautiful. Um, and it makes me so sad because the sexual sharing of two people in love is meant, it's going to be a little awkward, a little halting, there's going to be learning needed, patience, gratitude, kindness. It's very human. And the idea that it's been so uh, manufactured for common consumption um, kind of breaks my heart because it's such a sweet part of humanity and connection. And now it just looks like Hollywood if you're looking at the wrong things. So chemistry has to be there, but it's not a performance sport. So hopefully you and your partner can come to some kind of agreement. If one or the other has been addicted to porn, you're going to have issues. You're going to have situations and expectations that maybe you have no intention of rising to, fulfilling, and that has to be discussed in advance. Chemistry, now, let's say it. Let's get it said. You can have wild chemistry with a person and there's no sexual sharing that should take place. It can be like the wrong person, find it hilarious and back away, because the fact that you have big chemistry doesn't mean there's any need for sexual sharing. As a matter of fact, those intense feelings of passion, again, the passions are neither good nor bad. They just are, but you don't act on wrong prompts, wrong urges. Like, and is that the thing where it's like, okay, just because I feel I might want to try this, it's a good thing? No, on the contrary, all of our urges aren't good urges. And the fact that you have an urge, I don't know, don't give it much attention if it's not ordered toward the good of someone else and you. You're going to be attracted to a lot of people in your lifetime. Most times, you're not going to even guarantee a relationship with them, and certainly no need to share yourself sexually. Let's isolate lust out here. Maybe that's a good thing to do. Lust is different from like nice, happy chemistry. Happy chemistry has a playfulness in it, mutual delight, kind of a laugh and a half there. Someone comes in the room and you're alert. That's happy chemistry. Now, how do you distinguish between lust? Lust is always directed towards self, not other. Lust wants to take, not necessarily be given. Lust will prompt using, not reverencing. Lust isn't about mutual respect and care. It's a demand. There's always a demand in lust, an ugly demand, and an entitlement. I'm entitled to this. I demand this and I'm entitled to this. Like, I hate even talking about it. It's almost like contemptuous, rather, as opposed to delight. It's a contemptuous taking of something. It prompts disrespect, not respect. It's using, it's utilitarian, it's objectification. Lust will eventually make us feel unsafe emotionally instead of emotionally safe. So you're dating someone and it's going well. Maybe you don't ascribe to the Catholic practice of waiting to share yourself sexually until you're married. That's protective in nature. And you can all guess why. And let's be honest with ourselves and admit that the sexual sharing, much of it that occurs outside of marriage, can hurt you, can leave you vulnerable, can leave you being used, didn't, like, let's say, keep you any safer psychologically, physically, or emotionally. But let's be honest about that. But again, I understand not everybody agrees with that teaching. So, unsafe emotionally. So you're with somebody who says, oh, this will be fun. Oh, this will be great. Oh, I want to do this. This is my desire. This is my, what do they call it? Fantasy. And so you're like, oh God. And I've talked to a lot of young people who say, and you're like, oh, I'm expected to do this. It's just what you have to do. And I would reply, no, it's not. You don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with. And it's a game that's making something that's supposed to be fun and beautiful into like something that has nothing to do with you. But ultimately, you give way to these things and you will eventually feel used, degraded, undignified. I knew someone once said, yeah, this is what we do. Now, you could be honest with this person. Well, oh, he likes it because of this, that, and the other. I said, man, I don't know. I think you should find your inner no, because it doesn't sound like that. Time goes on, and this thing gets uglier and uglier, greater and greater demand. It had nothing to do with love for her. It was lust. It was using. It was dark. And then ultimately, exposed her to extraordinary, just exposed her to other people, covertly filming and that sort of thing. So like what started out as a little manufactured lust or supposedly was a bit of fun, did go down a very dark path that left her in a divorce situation. And I would say quite appropriately. I mean, she should have possibly run for cover long before she did, because she was a good person trying to do the right thing. She stayed longer than she should have. Um, he had problems. Like, let's be honest. He just had problems. And he didn't view her in a dignified way. And I've seen women do this to men. I don't think so much sexually, but how the heck would I know? But I've seen them do this to men in ways where I thought, you think he's like a purse. He's not a purse. This is a person. And you're using him. And you're talking about him in a way that objectifies him and reveals your contempt. Because if you're marrying someone so you can get the expectations where I want this, I want that, I want this, he makes this much money, get a grip. That's not a husband. Because a husband or a wife is a lover. And a lover presumes love. And again, that mutual delight and laughter. So you're taking it all out when you're using someone in these ways. Okay, lust is a bad thing. Lust is going to settle for anything. If there's someone is a spirit of lust towards you and it's not love, you're ultimately going to not be given what you need. You're going to sacrifice your own dignity, and it will potentially end in tears. I would start asserting some boundaries sexually. The minute somebody starts telling you they want something you're not comfortable with. But chemistry and attraction is still a beautiful, lovely, powerful thing. And it has to be there. If you don't want someone near you, but you're great friends, okay, I'll tell you a story about someone. I thought this was the funniest story because it was so true. Again, the real life of it. So she was married, and there was a young girl, a bunch of women were working together, and in very serious circumstances of crimes, and it was gritty. Life was gritty for us, but it was also fun because we would talk, as women do. So this young girl was saying, well, I might marry him, I might not marry him. The problem is, I'm just not sure I want him that close to me. I don't want him that physically close to me, which was hilarious. So this woman is thinking, I could see on her face. I said, what are you thinking? She goes, I'll just do it. Don't tell anyone this story. Now I'm saying it on a podcast, but it was 30 years ago. So no way of tracking her. She said, I'm dating this guy. He's my husband. We've been married since she had a great, great marriage. She said, so we're dating and he wants to get married. And she said, I kind of wanted to marry him. Yeah, I'd like to be with him. But she said, I had this thing about my personal space. So I said to him, all right, well, we can get married, but we have to have separate bedrooms. I don't want you in my bedroom. And he was like, look, I'm not going to marry you if you're not going to let me in your bedroom. I mean, that's not right. That feels terrible. She's like, well, we'll have to think about it. So she thought about it. She said, okay, all right, I'll marry you, but we're going to have a king-size bed, and just imagine a line down the middle. And if you ever cross the line, you're out of the bedroom. Keeping you in my bed if you're going to. She said, I just don't like the feeling of someone touching me at night. I need to be sleeping in a way where I'm not going to be touched at night. So this guy really loved her, and she loved him. It just didn't look like, these Netflix shows. So time goes on anyway. They agree to some ground rules. They get married. And there's so many funny stories about this couple, but this one was. So she said to the young girl considering marriage, but apprehensive about being that close and physically touched. And, people like sex. It's just that constant physical touch that someone will be like, please don't hang on me. They have different needs for space. And so she said, now, the girl said to her, but how did it go? She said, well, he was really good about staying on his side. She said, almost to the point where I thought, he has no desire to be near me. She said, but that was okay with me. I had to accept it. And she said, then after a year, I didn't mind it if he put his leg on my side. And I would kind of look for his leg. She said then, this is real life. Then she said, after like 2 years, I didn't mind him coming over in the nighttime. She said, it took about a total of 2.5, 3 years. And she said, and then it was fine and everything was okay. And I wanted to be close to him, and I liked to be, physically proximate at night. This has nothing to do with sex, by the way. So if you're listening and you don't want someone hanging all over you, it doesn't mean you're non-sexual or that you have a sex problem. It just means you like your space. It's no problem. The other thing, people have this idea of marriage. They used to. Maybe they don't now because people tend to live together. But that you had to be comfortable sleeping in someone's arms or something. And um, that's just not it. You got to sleep. Uh, Maybe it grows into something like that. You see what I'm saying about chemistry? It's a funny thing. And it's not always, it cannot be a foundation for marriage by itself. It can't. Because, like, I don't want to say it's the smallest part, but it could be a small indicator of the ultimate success of the marriage, if that makes sense. Marriage is that's not the biggest thing. Okay. But, so, okay, so now we're looking at ourselves and we're saying, am I the right person? Am I making a decision to marry someone from a position of saying, yeah, I'm pretty, know myself. I know what I want. I know what I don't like. I'm not falling apart. I'm not addicted to anything. Yeah, I think I could be a healthy spouse in a marriage. I think I'm able for marriage because it's going to test you. So, okay, let's talk about spirituality because this is a program on spirituality. So it was going to always come up. So now, spiritually, are you happy enough that you're, within 100 miles of where you need to be spiritually? Meaning, I believe in God. I'm practicing my faith this much, but I'm probably going to increase my practice as I get older. And I do want my children to grow up as we are Catholics. So, in my faith, okay, a vague notion of someday I'll go back. Now, are you marrying someone who's going to accommodate that is the problem. Because if you're non practicing and they would be stunned to know that you want to raise kids Catholic, you got to put the brakes on and get that piece done. Just get it ironed out. So, what you're saying is, I really want my children to come up to be raised Catholic. It was good for me as a child. It gave me stability and safety and confidence. Um, Although I'll bet you that it wasn't perfect, and that should be acknowledged. And I didn't like this piece, so I'm not going to do that. But I did love all of this, and I'm going to do it this way. Will the person, be open to that? I once knew a man who dated a woman for years, but he would not marry her and ultimately broke up because she was sarcastic about his faith. And he said, I don't mind someone being neutral about it. I have no need to force someone into a faith practice they don't want. But he said, I couldn't take the sarcasm. And he said, when I finally realized that ridicule, that sarcasm, I mean, if that's directed at the most sacred part of me, well, it's directed at me. So based on that, he applauded his decision not to marry, and he broke up finally because he thought that's not okay. Um, it really is nice to be with someone who shares your faith. It's not everything, but if you have some idea that you're going to convert the person after you're married, I think I'd be careful there. It could go well. And many times it has. I've seen many people from two faiths decide on one and go for it with great outcomes. Great outcomes. No problem. Really, there has to just really be an overall understanding between both that, you know, I believe this, it's sacred to me. And are you willing to row into it enough for us to have unity in our family, to balance the family? And a lot of times that's no problem, that goes well. The other thing you're thinking about too is your extended family. How's the person with no religion going to blend in a very Catholic family? Is the family robust enough to absorb that person in love and have it not be a big issue? So, you're thinking of your potential spouse's experience of your family too. Ground rules have to be established with your family as well as with the person. Um, Okay, big question here. How do you feel in the relationship? Are you yourself? Parents looking, I've said this before, I know I'm repeating myself. Parents looking at their children dating or with someone often should be looking not at the potential, although you're checking it out, but does your son or daughter look like themselves with the person? Their happy self, who they really are, because we parents tend to know. And if they look like something else, oh, they've discovered they have 6 new hobbies they're passionate about that just seem to match with the other person's, or no, they no longer like this because the other person doesn't. Like if you're turning yourself inside out to match another person, that's a warning sign. That would be a flag for a parent, and it would be a flag for me. Um, is can you be yourself? Uh, are you your best self? Like, I've seen people who choose drinkers with disastrous results. Whereas but obviously, if you're a big drinker, you're going to choose someone who drinks so you can drink. And your thinking is, and it never works out, trust me. The thinking behind it is always, well, they like to drink too, so they're not going to come at me for my drinking. Oh my God, the implosions are real. Trust me, if two heavy drinkers get married, it's like, there was an old movie, The Days of Wine and Rose. It's not good. So think about, are you your best self? Are you comfortable expressing the things that are most sacred to you? Is there any fear in you that if you expressed your real self, spiritually or in any other way, that person would reject you? There's nothing lonelier, my friends, than being with a person with whom we are not free to be our true self, like unmolested. If every time you show your real self or your inner self, you're ridiculed for it or mocked or distorted, well, that's not safe. That leads to terrible isolation and loneliness in that it's like having an emotional ache all the time if you're not allowed to be yourself. Okay, so very basic. Is this person um, show signs that they've taken any kind of journey? Like, is there depth? Don't marry someone who's shallow because it's going to be sad for you and it's going to be lonely and you're going to be bored. Don't marry someone who just doesn't show any like ability or capacity to dive into the deeper meanings of life. I mean, I asked someone one time, has this person ever heard of an orphanage? I mean, has this person ever wondered about homelessness? Have they ever been part of a fundraiser or a car wash for a family in need? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to marry someone who's fanatically this way, but they have to have capacity to serve, right? Now you might say, "Ah, that's not important to me." Fair enough, then just discard what I'm saying. But I think you would want someone who's, an old priest said to me once, well, he wasn't old now, now I'm old, but he at the time was probably 60. And he said, I don't want to hang around or talk to anyone who hasn't been broken. He said, because they're boring, they're not interesting, and they're not talking real. You're talking tripe. You're talking superficial at a level. He said, I don't want conversations with people who haven't been broken. My friends, if you've been broken, he would like to talk to you because he'd be getting real from you. So that's something to look at. Um, let's see, what else? Oh, like I think that there's something that's not very nice, and maybe it doesn't bother you, but it might bother you later. Have you ever been with someone who's cynical, too cool, superior, cynical? Everything's kind of a joke. There's a bit of a sneer. And I mean, that can be funny, and it can make you laugh in the beginning, but boy, does it get old. And so look temperamentally at the person, and if that's what they're doing, it's actually sneaky anger, or terrible disappointment that hasn't been engaged with. So you're looking for that as a warning thing that, it's not going to be much fun to be around that person a lot. You're not looking for perfect people, they don't exist, but you want someone who's kind of at least a little bit humble, willing to admit they're wrong, um, willing to adjust or adapt. Flexible. Flexibility is really good. Rigidity is really frightening because when you get into life, you've got two separate people coming from two unique families. You're putting them in one house and hoping they'll get along. And the differences, even though you could say you're very alike, the differences will pop up. They just have to be. How are you going to handle conflict? That's you got to look at it in advance. How do you handle conflict together? When you have a disagreement or something, um, how does the person handle it? How do you handle it? To state the obvious, uh, you could. I remember saying to someone, um, "She's really nice and everything, but she appears to be driving you crazy. You're losing it, and that's not a good fruit." So I wonder if this relationship's a good thing for you because it's keeping you constantly on one foot and you don't look secure and you don't look overly happy. You look worried a lot. You look like you're carrying and bearing a lot of tension. So, the effect on you has to be honestly looked at. I mean, and I know people want to get married, and when they want to get married, sometimes they really want to get married. And especially if all their friends are married or there's a fear that this marriage train is passing them by. But I wouldn't make a wrong decision in service to because it just leads to um, unhappiness, as you know. Uh, So if someone has a different religion, say, well, you want to talk about that in advance. How are we going to negotiate that? Many women will, at some period of their life, if they're having children, decide to stay home if they can financially afford it. So I don't think there's anything new. But there's this whole, oh, I guess they're traditional housewives, and I haven't done any homework on this. Um, but they make it a big their identity is, "Oh, I'm staying home. I'm doing the laundry and there's this big identity around serving their husband and he works and he brings the money home and I stay here and I serve and I would be really careful here about what you're doing because in a way their attitude to me actually seems to be um demeaning the contribution. The contribution of a wife and mother and someone running a house, actually running a house, not just camping out in it. I mean, the contribution is priceless. It's priceless. And it's a lot about heart of mother, heart of woman. And so to act like, oh, I'll do it for him because he's working. Sure, I'll cook his meals. You're demeaning, the attitude demeans both of them. Something in it offended me horrendously. And I mean, women should not cede ground that's been gained in um, like equal but different contributions, uh, equally important contributions, and yet retaining the differences. So I agree that what they're doing is a good thing. I think it won't be for every woman, every family, not woman. It won't be for every family. Um, So let's just watch how we value and present our contribution if we are moms staying home with kids and running a household. There's enormous power and dignity, and those are the people really uh, who have the space to pay attention to the culture, the communities in which they live. That because if you're working full time and you have kids and a husband, there are demands being made on you that take up all your space. And if you're a working mom with young kids, you got to let it go. Your time, free time, is with your kids. I mean, these are things that have to be talked about between potential spouses. The kids grow up, and you've got one shot at it, so you want to make it count. Um, okay, let's see. All right, now you're deciding whether or not to marry someone. Okay, how does your family feel about them? If you have credible family members who have always been people you generally respect and sometimes disagree with, but overall you think they've got good judgment, and if they're raising red flags and concerns, pay attention. Pay attention. Don't discount it, um, because their concerns potentially are on the money. And maybe you can allay their concerns. Maybe you can say, I hear what you're saying. I see how it looks. But here are some other elements that you should be aware of when you're looking at that. I think we've got that well discerned, well looked at. Um, but if family can be wrong, but often they're not. And how many times have you in your life looked at a relationship someone you love is having and thinking, oh, no way, there's no way? If that's the case, then you have to acknowledge that someone else could be looking at you that way and could have those concerns. Okay, that's a lot for this one. I think that a separate one will be about red flag warnings for intimate partner violence, domestic violence. But those are just some thoughts that should be tumbling around in your head like marbles when you're looking at a relationship and discerning whether or not it's a caliber for marriage. God bless you. Lots of love. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Interior Life Podcast, which is a backpack production sponsored by Aging with Dignity.